Before we start, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. One more thing before we roll. In 1909, a town earned a post office, appeared on the railroad sheets, showed up in a school census, and never built a single house. Keep one rule in mind as we go. Real places leave weight: mail, cargo, receipts, headstones, complaints. When those are missing, something is wrong. That is our test for every claim you will hear in this chapter. The first name on the board is Edwin Hollis, a contract cartographer out of Chicago. His job in 1908 and 1909 was field corrections for insurance atlases and railroad supplements across a cluster of Midwestern counties. He lived inside the public land survey grid, section corners, plat descriptions, sidings, schools, and bridges. He corrected plates with small overlays so the printer did not have to recast nickel cliches. His notes are dry and precise. That is why the anomaly stands out. In February 1909, Hollis drew a new dot on his county sheet. It sat on a section line near a sharp creek bend. Next to the dot, he printed a name: New Winslow. Under it, he wrote coordinates and 3 letters he used nowhere else: PM Book. To Hollis, that meant the postmaster's ledger confirmed the office. If a name had a post office, it usually earned a dot. Mapmakers trusted postal weight. Hollis went to the office listed for New Winslow. It was a counter in J.A. Kelton's general store. The hook behind the counter held the receiving and dispatch ledger. Kelton's handwriting was formal and clean. The columns showed 60-plus deliveries weekly, rural routes that ran like spokes, money orders sold, and marginal notes about mailbox repairs. The surnames fit the county: German, Scots, the usual mix. Hollis copied the essentials, thanked Kelton, and wrote New Winslow on his sheet with confidence. He also marked a planned spur track that the depot agent swore would be ready by harvest. Hollis left that evening on a freight north. He never set foot at the creek bend. Back in Chicago, the printer did not scrap the spring plate. He added an overlay and re-etched the corner with the new dot. The overlay was filed wider than the fix required. On the printed edition, the township that held New Winslow shifted a sliver east. Owners would not see that by eye. A treasurer would feel it when notices no longer matched parcels. By June, the county treasurer had 3 letters back from New Winslow, marked no such office, and forwarding period expired. He pinned them under a pig-shaped paperweight and sent his deputy to the railroad for the latest station map. If the railroad had changed a name or code, his books would follow the railroad. The railroad yard inspector was Samuel Reed. He was a totals man. He had a new scale pit and a habit of counting wagons at lunch. His ledger tracked car counts by day and destination. A new destination code appeared that spring: NW. It was never spelled out. It showed 2 outbound cars one week, then 4, then 7. Loads looked plausible: dry goods, lumber, general merchandise. The problem was the empties. They did not come back in a pattern that matched the loads. Reed wrote a small question mark in the margin and kept counting. He checked inbound manifests. No chalkboards, no coal, no nails in volume, no hay, and no seed. A town with teamsters and no fodder is borrowing animals or inventing occupations. He asked the agent about the spur. Ties were stacked, but rails were not down. A teamster claimed he had delivered stovepipe south of the bend to fresh foundations. Reed noted it and kept his doubts quiet. He was not ready to accuse a dot on a map of being a rumor. Across the square, a photographer named Owen Latch was coating glass plates and shooting everything that would hold still. He sold cheap prints and sometimes full contact sheets for county reports. In late May, he boxed 6 family portraits and 2 wedding poses addressed New Winslow, care of Kelton. The runner did not collect them. Latch carried the box to the store. Kelton was out. A boy at the counter said he was the nephew and that the ledger was at home for balancing. Latch left the box. 2 weeks later, it came back on a farm wagon with a neat note. Returned, insufficient address. The same hand that wrote the ledger columns had written the note. Latch slid the box under his work table and decided not to argue with paper. Individually, these facts do not scream. Together, they begin to grind. The push that forces them together is a packet of deeds. Buyers from out of state filed for lots described around New Winslow. Each petition included a letter from a development agent, a bank draft on a thick paper bank in another state, and a brochure. The brochure claimed a grain elevator, a school opening in October, and a pending depot name. It said 92 votes had been cast in the last local option election. It showed a photograph of children at slates with a parlor organ behind them. If you look closely, 3 faces repeated at slightly different sizes, and the organ lacked 2 stops common to that brand. The recorder did not look closely. He docketed the deeds, smiled at the bank paper, and moved on to the next stack. The local newspaper ran a small item. New settlement rising south of the creek bend. Post office in temporary quarters. Families arriving by wagon. School to open in October. The typesetter pulled wood type that spelled prosperity for a later headline when the elevator went up. Hollis read the item in a coffee house 3 counties away and felt confirmed. He told the printer to keep the overlay for one more pass because he expected to add a school symbol by summer. He was now mapping paper to plate, not ground to plate. Kelton's ledger changed tone in early summer. The columns grew. Names repeated with a pattern that looked less like neighbors and more like a list. Rural route counts ticked up. Money orders lined up at even sums to the same out-of-state bank that funded the deeds. To a person who wanted a town to be real, this looked like proof. To Reed, it looked like a feed line. Reed visited Kelton in July under the pretext of planning fall freight. Kelton said NW stood for New Winslow and that a stop name assignment was in process. Reed asked for rural route maps to plan heavy deliveries. The maps looped along the creek and shied away from the open ground where streets should have been. No grades marked, no bridges noted, no carriage warnings. Reed thanked him and left with one decision: test the paper. He quietly asked the yard clerk to weigh and open the next outbound crate to NW. The manifest said mixed merchandise and ledgers. Inside were bookkeeping ledgers, blank forms, rubber stamps, a bundle of stationery, and chalkboards with shallow practice scratches. He expected tools and nails. He noted what he saw and kept his mouth shut. He could not afford to be wrong in public. A county attorney started to tug. He requested from the railroad any photographs taken at the creek bend. A company man with a folding camera turned in a slow circle out there and shot what he saw. The prints came back, post holes, a fire ring, a canvas office once held up by a circus banner, and a parcel marker that did not match the section number on the new plate. The attorney sent the prints to the recorder with a short note and walked across the square to ask Kelton for his postal quarterly returns. Kelton said federal forms were not shown to private parties. The attorney left without a fight. He was counting who looked at which hook when certain words were spoken. A second pressure point appeared inside the courthouse. The poorhouse accounts were kept by Margaret Fisk, a woman with exact eyes. She noticed that 3 New Winslow lot buyers shared a surname with an absent man in her care. She wrote letters to those surnames. All 3 came back, undeliverable, forwarding expired. She carried the bundle to the recorder and asked whether the bank was real. The recorder waved the brochure. "Fine paper," he said. Fisk answered with 4 words that never stopped being true. "Fine paper proves nothing." Latch pulled the box from under his table in August and tried again to deliver. He hired a boy with a wagon. The road south rattled their teeth and then became ruts. There were wagon tracks and cattle marks. No houses. 3 lots available. Inquire at store signs had been planted and then stacked in a ditch. Shipping crates lay split and empty. Latch recognized his own studio backdrop in the brochure image. The schoolroom photo had been staged with his props. He loaded one of the signs into the wagon and went home angry at himself for being used. News traveled with the speed of convenience. A salesman swore he saw lanterns at night. A stranger said the stew was thin at a boarding house near the Bend. A drifter said people got lost there after dark. None of those stories included directions that could be walked in daylight. People liked the sound of growth more than the work of checking. The county attorney wrote 3 letters. One went to the State Railroad Commission asking about unserved destinations that still appeared on company paperwork. One went to the Post Office Department's Division of Postmasters asking for the status of a New Winslow appointment and for copies of the office's quarterly returns. One went to the out-of-state bank requesting officer names and contact details for the development account. He sanded the ink, folded the pages, and sent them out. The first answer came back from Washington. It said there was no permanent appointment for an office called New Winslow. It admitted a temporary distributing point had been authorized under the existing township name during spring washouts, and that the department expected a quarterly return to reconcile stamp sales reported by J.A. Kelton. It also said a field inspector would be scheduled to verify conditions on the ground. No dates, no promises. Just a clock starting. At the same time, names began to multiply on other sheets. A deputy registrar brought in a ruled booklet with 39 new electors under the precinct header that now casually included New Winslow. Ages centered between 30 and 45. Occupations read like a clean brochure: carpenter, cooper, grain buyer, clerk, teacher, teamster. 10 days later, the school census arrived with 22 children counted for New Winslow. The surnames harmonized with the voter list. Money would follow head count. Stamps tend to follow money. Elias Martin, a state enumerator running a trial count before the federal census, walked the South Precinct with printed householder sheets. He found wagon ruts and holes that might have been test posts. He found no dwellings. He returned to town and filled blanks with names supplied by people who did not provide addresses you could point to on a road. His sheets, when filed, showed 3 identical child age patterns and 4 boarders lodged at houses without enough beds. The superintendent stamped them anyway. The stamp moved money. Reed compared the voter occupations to his inbound freight. He circled teamster 3 times and wrote "no hay, no oats" in the margin. He asked the agent to hold another crate to N.W. It contained more ledgers, blank forms, and a small tin of brass tokens stamped "Company." He kept 1 token on his desk as a reminder to keep his conclusions slow and his questions pointed. Fisk walked into Kelton's store one afternoon and found the nephew alone with the ledger open. She asked in her calm county voice to check money order stub numbers because the poorhouse was reconciling postage. The boy turned 3 pages and handed her a thin envelope of stubs. She copied 24 numbers and dates and left. The county attorney wrote Washington again, this time with exact stub numbers. The reply took longer. While they waited, the story of New Winslow hardened into a routine. People said the school would open after harvest. People said the spur would reach the bend in the fall. People said, "I heard more than I saw." The reply finally arrived. The department had no remittances matching those stub numbers. The letter included the line that matters. Failure to remit is a federal violation. The county attorney carried that letter to Kelton and asked to see the returns that matched the stubs. Kelton said the cash and returns had been sent. The department must have misplaced them. He said he could produce copies. The attorney said he would wait. Kelton said his brother handled deposits and was away. The attorney left without a public scene and told the sheriff to be ready for warrants. One more piece moved. A packet of petitions arrived from out-of-state buyers asking the court to recognize their deeds and protect their improvements. The affidavits repeated a phrase about mutual convenience of the undersigned. The acknowledgments were all taken by the same traveling notary. The county attorney subpoenaed the notary's register. He also asked Latch to bring any photographs that showed the bend after midsummer. Latch brought a panorama, ruts, grass, 3 weathered, lots available boards, and an empty horizon. By the end of the week, the Railroad Division Superintendent asked Reed a blunt question. Was NW a real destination that exposed the company to demurrage claims? Reed brought his ledger, pointed to the unmatched empties, and said carefully that he could not establish a served location. The superintendent sent a company man to the bend again with a tape and asked the county attorney to advise whether the company had been misled. The prints came back the same. The tape came back with numbers that matched open ground. The county attorney prepared 2 warrants, seized the post office ledger and money order records, searched the store's back room for stamps, plates, and correspondence. He also drafted a simple charge sheet that a county judge could actually hear. False pretenses, false filings, forged acknowledgments. Postal counts would wait for the federal inspector. He put the drafts in a folder and checked the calendar for Monday. Then he wrote 3 more letters, one to the State Railroad Commission, one to Washington confirming the inspector's arrival date, and one to the thick paper bank demanding an officer in person. He put sand on the ink and closed the folder. He did not know which letter would bring a straight answer, or whether any would. He only knew the clock had started and that paper was moving faster than wagons. This kind of fraud starts with names, not money. Names look like proof from far away. If you can stack them in neat columns, most people will not walk the road to check. The first new stack arrived as a voter supplement. A deputy registrar carried a ruled booklet into the recorder's office and asked for a quiet table. He left an hour later. The booklet now held 39 fresh electors under the precinct header that, by habit, included New Winslow. Ages clustered between 30 and 45. Occupations sounded like a brochure: carpenter, cooper, teamster, grain buyer, grocer, teacher, clerk. Nothing exotic, nothing that makes a clerk pause. It looked right. 10 days later, the school census landed on the superintendent's desk. 22 children were counted for New Winslow, 9 girls, 13 boys. The surnames echoed the voter list. Head count determines money. The stamp moved forward without a knock on a single door. Samuel Reed, the railroad yard inspector, read those lists the way other men read weather. He circled the word teamster 3 times and checked his inbound freight. No hay, no oats, no grass seed. He found 2 small deliveries of harness oil and nothing else that keeps animals alive. Reed closed the book and wrote 4 words beside the occupation column. Animals without fodder. Improbable. He tested paper with a physical check. He asked the agent to hold the next outbound car coded NW until he examined the crate marked Mixed Merchandise and Ledgers. The crate contained blank ledgers, rubber stamps, forms, a bundle of stationery, and small chalkboards scored with practice scratches. No tools, no nails, no cookware, no seed. Reed said nothing. He made a private list and told the agent to load the car. Across the square, the county attorney received the only answer Washington would send before the air turned cold. The post office department confirmed there was no permanent post office named New Winslow. It noted a temporary distributing point had been authorized under the township name during spring washouts. It requested the quarterly return that should reconcile stamp sales reported by J.A. Kelton. It also stated that a field inspector would be scheduled. No date, no promise. But the department had now put its name on the page. The lists kept growing. A state enumerator named Elias Martin walked the South Precinct with trial householder sheets. He was paid by the line, and he narrated while he wrote, which made people underestimate him. He found wagon ruts. He found post holes. He did not find dwellings south of the creek bend. Back in town, he filled blanks with names given over counters. His sheets showed 3 households with identical child ages in the same order. His sheets also lodged 4 boarders in houses that did not have enough beds. The superintendent stamped them anyway. The stamp moved money again. The photographer, Owen Latch, spotted a different duplication. 2 family portraits taken weeks apart showed the same back row man with the same stubborn cowlick and the same tie pin. One order card read Herndon, the other read Herring. Both were addressed New Winslow, care of Kelton. Latch carried the prints to the county attorney. The attorney nodded at 2 families. Latch forced him to see one face twice. The room felt smaller after that. Margaret Fisk, who managed the poorhouse accounts, watched names for a living. She noticed 3 New Winslow deed buyers shared a surname with an absent man on her intake roll. She mailed letters. All 3 came back marked undeliverable. Forwarding period expired. She set the envelopes on the recorder's counter and asked whether the bank on the thick paper was real. The recorder lifted the glossy brochure. "Fine paper," he said. Fisk answered without raising her voice. "Fine paper proves nothing." Kelton met every small nudge with a ready sentence. He said the school count was accurate because 2 families arrived late in the month. He said the voter list was clean and that the registrar met the men in person at his counter. He said ledgers were moving fast because growing towns burn paper. He would not show money order deposits. He said his brother carried the remittances to the rail agent with the weekly pouch. He smiled while saying it. Reed pushed one step further. For 2 weeks, every outbound package to NW was weighed, opened, and repacked before loading. It was not regulation. The clerk agreed because he was sick of demurrage complaints. Reed kept a private inventory, stationery, ledgers, stamps, blank forms, school slates, a tin of brass tokens stamped Company. He kept 1 token on his desk. It helped him ask sharper questions. Fisk found a gap she could use. She walked into Kelton's store while the nephew sat behind the counter with the postal ledger open. She asked, in a voice that assumed cooperation, to copy money order stub numbers for county postage reconciliation. The boy turned 3 pages, pulled an envelope of stubs, and handed it over. Fisk copied 2 dozen numbers and dates, returned the envelope, and bought a bar of lye she did not need. The attorney sent those exact stub numbers to Washington. Then they waited. While they waited, stories multiplied. A traveling salesman swore he saw a ribbon of lanterns near the bend. A stranger at a hotel said the stew was thin at a boarding house south of the creek. A drifter said people lost their way there after dark. None of those lines came with a direction you could walk at noon. People preferred the sound of growth to the work of checking. Elias Martin circled back on his own work. He asked the registrar who supplied the new Winslow voter names. The registrar said lists build themselves when a post office corner thrives. Martin took a long walk to the bend and wrote nothing. He met a wagon coming toward him on the way back. It was Kelton. They nodded and passed. Kelton said the federal inspector was coming next week. Martin said the heat would be worse by then. Their smiles did not reach their eyes. The answer from Washington finally arrived. No remittances matched the money order stubs Fisk had copied. The letter added a printed warning about failure to remit. The county attorney carried that letter to the store and asked to see the quarterly returns that matched those stubs. Kelton said the department must have misplaced them and that he could produce copies. The attorney said he would wait. Kelton said his brother handled deposits and was away. The attorney left without a scene and told the sheriff to prepare warrants. Latch climbed into his studio attic that week to pull an old church picnic plate. He wanted to match faces against names because his memory now felt borrowed. Between plates he found a small envelope. Inside was a strip of contact tests from a new lens. One frame showed Kelton practicing 2 signatures at a table. Another showed a neat column of first names without surnames, as if someone were rehearsing a roster. Latch set the strip on the table and stood still for a full minute. Reed kept his checks physical. He sat by the scale with a lantern during a late load and listened. 2 wagons rolled onto the platform with crates marked books. He heard a dull, even shift when a wheel crossed a plank seam. Books do not talk like that. He eased a pry bar under a lid and lifted a 1/4 inch. Nails complained. He closed the crate and wrote 1 sentence in his pocketbook. Ballast inside mixed freight. Destination NW. The attorney received a sealed canvas mail sack at noon the next day. It was addressed to him by name. The lock number matched a federal key the clerk fetched from a drawer. The return read, Post Office Department, Division of Postmasters. Inside the sack were 3 smaller sacks, each tagged New Winslow, Quarterly Return. They opened the first sack. On top sat neat forms, stamp sales, money orders, rural route counts, all in the same tidy hand. Totals balanced. Under the forms was a second stack, letters to the bank authorizing transfers from purchasers' drafts to a development account. The signatures looked correct until you asked where those officers lived. At the bottom were 3 small cloth bags bound with twine. Each bag was heavy. Each bag held lead shot. They opened the second sack. The same forms. More bank letters. 2 more shot bags. The third sack matched, but 1 bag was tied poorly and had leaked. A dark trail of shot dust rhymed the canvas throat. Fisk pointed to the certification line at the end of the returns. Postmaster J.A. Kelton, the signature read. Beneath it, in a clean office hand, sat an authorization by a second assistant postmaster general. The initials were wrong for the current officer. The department had changed staff 4 months earlier. Latch photographed everything as it lay. Reed wrote a plain statement. The sheriff logged the sacks and the shot. The county attorney drafted 2 warrants before dark. Seized the postal ledger and money order records. Searched the back room for stamps, plates, and correspondence. He added charges a county court could actually hear: obtaining property by false pretenses, filing false instruments, and forging acknowledgments. He left postal counts to the federal inspector, one set of hands per law. That kept jurisdiction clean. They served the warrants at 8 that evening. Kelton surrendered the public postal drawer. He refused to call the store ledger public. In the back room, the deputy found a small hand press, a type case, a rack of rubber date stamps, 2 metal nameplates that read New Winslow Development Company, and a cigar tin of brass tokens. A large ledger sat on the table under a damp cloth. Pages in the middle were glued stiff. The front and back sections turned. The center cracked like a cracker. Someone had sealed the book so it could travel to court unread. They boxed the press, stamps, plates, stiff ledger, and tokens. The sheriff posted a deputy on the door. The federal inspector's train was due the next afternoon. The attorney put the charge sheet in his briefcase and set the briefcase under his chair. By morning, 3 more things were fixed that had been loose. The registrar confirmed that he had watched men sign the voter supplement at the store, but could not swear those men lived south of the Bend. The superintendent admitted the school census was compiled from enumerator sheets and that his stamp moved funds. It was not proof of a building. The traveling notary produced his register. It held dozens of acknowledgments for New Winslow deeds, all taken in the store, all in the same careful hand, when buyers could not remain. He had trusted the postmaster's oath. The federal inspector stepped off the train, weighed the sacks, checked the returns against his book, and said the center of the ledger would be softened and copied under supervision tomorrow. He confirmed non-remittance for the copied stubs. He did not promise federal charges in that room. He said federal matters move on federal calendars. The county could proceed on county counts. The hearing was scheduled for Monday. On Sunday night, the store burned. The fire began in the back room. The deputy had stepped away to the privy for less than a minute. By the time he reached the door, flame was walking the ceiling. The hand press collapsed in heat. Rubber stamps charred. The plates survived, pitted and warped. The ledger was gone. The sheriff wrote, "Cause undetermined," because he lacked proof for a harder word. The inspector wrote 3 telegrams and left town to confer. The attorney brought witnesses anyway. Reed described codes, crates, and empties. The registrar admitted what he had and had not seen. The superintendent explained his stamp. Martin owned his bad sheets without excuses. Fisk produced the returned letters and stated how she got the money order stubs. The judge listened and asked for one surviving primary record that showed a scheme, not just inference. The sacks would have done it. The readable center of the ledger would have done it. Neither was on the table. A clerk then confessed something small that mattered. 2 men had presented a letter that morning bearing a federal seal and the county attorney's name, requesting temporary custody of the canvas sacks for secure copying. The clerk released them. The attorney had not signed that letter. The inspector had not sent it. The sacks were gone. The judge continued the matter for venue and evidence. He kept a narrow injunction on new deed filings in the move section. He told the county to hold its witnesses ready. He told the attorney to coordinate with the department. He did not say the word stolen. He did not need to. Nothing about those decisions was dramatic. Everything about them was final enough for now. The lists still looked like proof from far away. Up close, the names were exactly what they had been from the start. Neat lines written in ink. The sheriff booked the 3 canvas postal sacks, the forged returns, the lead shot, and the letters to the out-of-state bank. He logged chain of custody on a single page and signed twice. Latch photographed each item where it lay. Reed wrote a plain statement. Destination code, NW, mismatched empties, crates opened, ballast heard, pry bar replaced, note entered, in pocketbook. Margaret Fisk added her affidavit with the returned buyer letters and the money order stub numbers she copied from the store ledger. The county attorney drafted 2 warrants before midnight, one to seize the post office ledger and money order records, one to search the back room for printing plates, rubber stamps, and bank correspondence. They served both at 8 in the evening. Kelton was polite. He produced the public postal drawer and refused to call the store ledger a public record. The deputy opened the back room. He found a small hand press, a type case, a rack of date stamps, 2 zinc plates that read New Winslow Development Company, a cigar tin of brass company tokens, and a large ledger draped with a damp cloth. The front and back sections turned. The middle block was glued stiff. Pages cracked at the edge like crackers. Someone had prepared a book that could be carried into court and still be unreadable. Everything went into evidence boxes. The sheriff posted a deputy at the door. The federal inspector's train was scheduled for the next afternoon. The county attorney kept the charge sheet simple and inside state jurisdiction, obtaining property by false pretenses, filing false instruments, forging acknowledgments. Postal fraud and non-remittance would be federal. That separation mattered. It protected the case from a venue fight. On Saturday, the witnesses were lined up. The registrar confirmed he watched men sign the voter supplement at the store, but never verified residences south of the creek bend. The superintendent admitted the school census came from enumerator sheets and that his stamp moved funds. It was not proof of a building. The traveling notary Wentworth brought his register. It held dozens of New Winslow acknowledgments taken at the counter. He relied on Kelton to vouch for identity. He saw no company officer. He stamped anyway. Inspector Dwyer stepped off the noon train. He was compact, civil, and exact. He weighed the sacks, compared the quarterly returns to his department book, and confirmed non-remittance for the stub numbers Fisk sent. He said the glued block in the ledger would be softened with steam, opened, and copied under supervision on Monday morning. He did not promise federal charges in that room. He said federal matters move on federal calendars. The county could pursue state counts now. Sunday night the store burned. The fire started in the back room. The posted deputy stepped to the alley privy for less than a minute. By the time he reached the door again, flame had the ceiling. The bucket line could not catch up. The hand press collapsed. Rubber stamps charred. The zinc plates survived, pitted and warped. The ledger was gone. The sheriff wrote, "Cause undetermined," because there was no proof for a harder word. Dwyer sent 3 telegrams and left on the morning train to confer with his department. The hearing still opened on Monday. The judge wanted a record. Reed testified first. He kept it factual. New code NW appeared. Outbound loads rose. Empties did not match. Crates marked books sounded like ballast. A lid was eased and replaced. He made a pocket note. No talk about motive. Only wait. The registrar testified next. He saw signatures. He did not verify addresses. The superintendent followed. He stamped the school head count from sheets. He did not inspect a schoolhouse. Elias Martin stood and owned his sheets. He admitted filling blanks with names given in town. He admitted the duplicate child ages and overcrowded boarding claims. He had no addresses south of the bend to defend. Margaret Fisk submitted the 3 returned letters and described how she copied the money order stubs. The defense objected. The judge overruled. She was a county agent asking for postal reconciliation. She was handed an envelope by the person acting as clerk. Her tone never rose. Her sentences stayed short. Wentworth produced his notary register. He acknowledged he stamped deeds in the store, trusted the postmaster's word, and did not see a company officer. The bank did not appear. It sent a letter signed with initials and printed on thick paper. It threatened damages for defamation and offered no person to question. Hollis placed the printer's overlay on the table. He explained the sliver shift and his reliance on a listed post office in the PM book. He answered the judge's only important question clearly. Yes, a correction could be made on the faith of a post office listing without a site visit. No, it should not have been. He did not try to excuse his process. Inspector Dwyer did not testify. He was gone. The federal department was now moving on its own path. The judge set a narrow bar for the state counts. Produce one surviving primary record that showed a scheme, not just inference. The Sacks would have done it. The center of the ledger would have done it. Neither was on the table. A small disclosure, then, did the most damage. A clerk admitted that two men presented a letter that morning bearing a federal seal and the county attorney's name. It requested temporary custody of the 3 canvas sacks for secure copying. The clerk released the sacks. The county attorney had not signed that letter. Inspector Dwyer had not sent it. The sacks were gone. Court recessed for 1 hour. The sheriff checked the depot. No express shipment of heavy canvas left that morning. A man in a brown suit bought a northbound ticket for cash and carried 1 canvas bag. The deputy remembered nothing else. The judge returned with a narrow ruling. He continued the matter for 1 month to permit clarity on venue and evidence custody. He kept an injunction on new filings in the move section for 30 days. He refused to extend it further without exhibits. He told the county to hold its witnesses. He told the attorney to coordinate with Washington. He did not say the word stolen. He did not need to. Nothing in that ruling felt dramatic. Everything in it was final enough for now. The railroad acted anyway. The division removed NW as a destination code. The agent posted a notice that disputed consignments would be held at the yard. Reed erased NW from his column and told the clerk to open and list any mixed freight labeled for a place nobody could find. He kept 1 brass token on his desk as a reminder to check crates with his ears as well as his eyes. Hollis wrote the printer asking that his initials be removed from the fall plate. The printer issued a correction slip and pulled the overlay back to the proper grid. That did not move deeds already recorded. Paper did not flow backward through a vault. Fisk kept the poorhouse running. She stopped writing to surnames that never wrote back. She filed her copies of the photographs with flour receipts in a strong box because she trusted steel more than speech. She asked 3 offices if anyone had seen the boy who produced the stubs. No one had. She wrote the boy's name in her book and underlined it twice. Latch labeled his evidence prints for the first time in his life. Shot bags, forged returns, bank letters, warped plates. He made a panorama of the creek bend with Reed standing off frame. Ruts, grass, 3 sun-bleached, lots available boards in a ditch, and an empty horizon. He sent 1 set to the attorney, kept 1, and mailed a 3rd to the inspector's office. He never learned who opened that envelope. The bank kept sending letters that named no officer. The development agent stopped leaving handbills. The traveling notary left the county. Kelton reopened in a borrowed room. He sold lamp oil and flour and did not keep a ledger on a hook. The continuance date arrived. The county attorney stood and said the words that end cases. Primary exhibits were no longer in county custody. The federal department would not share materials or a witness. Without Sachs or a readable ledger center, the state could not carry the burden. He asked the court to maintain the limited injunction on new filings in the move section for 30 more days. The judge granted the narrow order and dismissed the case without prejudice. The docket line looked clean. The town record did not. 2 after notes slid in and changed nothing. The first was an envelope with no return, postmarked up the line. It contained 1 torn ledger leaf listing 8 money orders to the same bank, a pencil total, and a single word in the margin: remitted. The second was a claim from an out-of-state man who said he poured a foundation south of the bend and wanted compensation for interference. He could not take anyone to the foundation. He said the river took it. He could not name a neighbor. He named a teamster who never appeared in any other book. There is no stamp that says a place never existed. There is a drawer with papers that describe it as if it did, a corrected plate that came too late, and a yard where a scale reads true, while the ledger reads what someone wants it to say. Reed kept the token, checked every car twice, and removed NW from the chalkboard for good.